The instructor claimed humans can't survive Deathworld training. She just savored her lunch. Part 1. The volcanic moon of Korath 7 smelled like burning metal and rotten eggs. The sky was the color of a fresh bruise, purple and black and angry, and the ground shook every few minutes from deep eruptions far below the surface. It was not a place built for comfort. It was a place built for making soldiers. The Galactic Deathworld Survival Academy sat on the edge of a massive crater, its buildings carved straight into black volcanic rock. For 300 years, the Academy had taken the toughest species in the known galaxy and turned them into something tougher. Graduates went on to become planetary survival specialists, first contact operatives, and Deathworld colonizers. The washout rate was 70%. The death rate, in bad years, was not 0. 42 cadets stood in 4 neat rows on the parade ground. They came from 18 different species. Some were enormous. Some were covered in natural armor. Some had claws that could cut through steel, or venom that could stop a heart in seconds, or eyes that could see in total darkness. They were the best their worlds had to offer, and they stood at attention while the hot wind blew ash across their faces. Senior Instructor Vrethkon walked out to meet them. She was Dralvani, a reptilian species built like a walking tank. She stood nearly 3 meters tall, her scaled body thick with natural plate armor that had turned aside bullets and blades alike over her long career. Her eyes were gold and cold, and when she spoke, her voice carried across the parade ground like a rock slide. You are here because someone somewhere believed you were strong enough to survive what I'm about to do to you, she said. She walked slowly along the front row, looking down at each cadet. Most of you will prove them wrong. You will cry. You will press your emergency beacon and go home to your soft beds on your soft worlds. This is not a failure. This is simply nature telling you the truth about what you are. She stopped walking. She had reached the end of the first row, and she was looking down at something that barely reached her chest. Maya Chen stood at attention. She was 28 years old, compact and lean, with black hair pulled back tight against her skull, and dark eyes that gave away absolutely nothing. She was wearing the same standard-issue training uniform as everyone else, except hers had been taken in at every seam because the smallest size was still made for beings twice her width. Under her left arm, she held a battered metal lunchbox. Vrethkon stared at her for a long time. Cadets, the instructor said, still looking at Maya, I want you to observe something. She pulled a datapad from her belt and held it up. This is the galactic biological profile for the species known as humans. I will read it to you. The parade ground went very quiet. No natural armor, Vrethkon read. No claws, no venom glands, no regenerative capability beyond basic wound healing over a period of days to weeks. Minimal low-light vision. Hearing range classified as narrow. Running speed, short distance, classified as moderate. Bone structure calcium-based, rated as brittle under high-impact stress. She lowered the datapad. In simple terms, this is a soft tissue organism wrapped around a breakable skeleton. The Galactic Biological Registry classifies humans as a Class 3 endurance species at best, suitable for temperate environments with moderate threat profiles. She looked around at the other cadets. Some of them were already grinning. A massive Gorvathi, in the second row, bear-like and broad as a shuttle, let out a low rumble that might have been a laugh. This cadet, Vrethkon continued, pointing one armored claw at Maya, is here because of a political agreement between the Terran Union and the Galactic Council. She is not here because she earned her place by the same standards as the rest of you. She is here as a courtesy. The word dripped from her mouth like something sour. I give her 6 days before she activates her emergency beacon. I encourage you not to waste your energy helping her when that time comes. Maya said nothing. Her face did not change. She stood at attention, and looked straight ahead at a point somewhere in the middle of Vrethkin's chest armor. And she breathed in and out like someone waiting for a bus. The other cadets stared at her. The big Gorvathi, whose name was Tor, shook his head slowly and looked away, already dismissing her. A Velinari in the third row, an insectoid with iridescent wings folded tight against her back and multifaceted eyes that caught the volcanic light, studied Maya with a different kind of attention. Her name was 6, and she was the highest-scoring applicant in the current cycle. She did not laugh. She watched. Vrethkon finished her opening address with a list of rules, schedules, and promises of suffering. Then she dismissed the cadets to their barracks. The barracks were carved into the rock, long rows of sleeping slabs designed for large bodies. Maya found her assigned slab. It was a flat piece of volcanic stone, slightly warm from the geothermal heat below, and it was roughly the size of a small car. She could have lain across it 3 times. She did not complain. She set her lunchbox on the slab, opened it carefully, and pulled out a sealed thermos and a small wrapped bundle. She unscrewed the thermos, and the smell of hot soup drifted out into the barracks. From the bundle, she unwrapped 2 rice balls, neatly shaped, with something dark and savory pressed into their centers. She sat cross-legged on the massive stone slab, and she ate. Around her, 41 cadets were unpacking, testing their slabs, comparing claws and armor and venom sacs. Some were already forming groups, sizing each other up, establishing the silent pecking order that would define the early weeks. None of them were eating. Most species in the galaxy treated food as fuel, something to be consumed quickly and efficiently between tasks. The idea of sitting down to eat slowly, to actually seem to enjoy it, was strange. Tor walked past her slab and stopped. He looked down at the small human sitting cross-legged, sipping soup from a thermos like she was on a picnic. "You know where you are, right?" he asked. His voice was deep enough to rattle the stone. Maya looked up at him. She chewed, swallowed, and nodded. "I do," she said. "And you are eating." "I am." Tor stared at her for another moment, then shook his massive head and walked away, rumbling to himself. From 2 slabs over, 6 watched in perfect silence, her multifaceted eyes unblinking. The next morning, Vrethkon assembled the cadets before dawn. The sky was still dark, lit only by the orange glow of distant lava flows and the faint shimmer of the gas giant that Korath 7 orbited. "Your first trial begins now," she said. "You will be dropped individually across the Ashland Flats, a 200-kilometer zone of active volcanic terrain. Toxic gas vents, silicate storms, surface temperatures exceeding what most of your species can tolerate for extended periods. You will have no tools, no communications, and no assistance. You will survive for 72 hours and reach the extraction beacon under your own power. Or you will activate your emergency beacon and leave my academy." She smiled, and it was not a kind smile. Her gold eyes found Maya in the formation. "Try not to die on the first day, mammal." Maya said nothing. She had already finished her breakfast. The instructor claimed humans can't survive Deathworld training. She just savored her lunch. Part 2. The transport ship dropped Maya Chen onto a flat stretch of black glass at dawn. The doors opened, the heat hit her like a wall, and then the ship was gone, roaring back up into the bruised sky and leaving her completely alone. She stood still for a full minute. She did not panic. She did not run. She looked around slowly, turning in a full circle, studying everything. The Ashland Flats stretched out in every direction, a nightmare landscape of cracked obsidian, bubbling mud pools, and tall columns of yellow gas that shot up from vents in the ground at random intervals. The air tasted like sulfur and hot metal. The ground was sharp enough to cut through standard boot material if she was not careful where she stepped. The temperature was already over 50 degrees. By midday, it would be worse. Maya knelt down and pressed her palm flat against the obsidian. Hot, but not burning. She could work with this. She stood up, picked a direction based on the position of the gas giant in the sky, and started walking. Not fast, steady. Across the 200-kilometer zone, 41 other cadets were doing the same thing, each in their own way. Tor, the massive Gorvathi, charged forward like a battering ram. His thick hide could handle the heat, his powerful legs could carry him over rough terrain, and his raw strength meant that nothing short of a cliff face would slow him down. He covered 15 kilometers in the first 2 hours. 6 moved differently. The Velinari was fast, incredibly fast, darting between rocks and using her natural camouflage to blend with the dark stone. She could change the color of her exoskeleton to match her surroundings, and she used this to avoid the silicon-based predators that lurked in the cracks between lava flows. But the heat was a problem. Velinari were built for temperate forests, not volcanic wastelands. And by midday, her movements had slowed to a careful, deliberate crawl. Others fared worse. A Felisari, a feline species with beautiful golden fur and excellent night vision, went down hard 6 hours in. The fur that made him a perfect hunter on his cool homeworld trapped heat like a blanket here. He triggered his emergency beacon from beside a gas vent, choking and overheating, and was pulled out by a medical shuttle within minutes. By the end of the first day, 7 cadets had washed out. Maya walked. She did not have claws to dig shelters. She did not have armor to shrug off the sharp obsidian. She did not have camouflage to hide from predators. What she had was something that no one at the academy had bothered to study, because it was not dramatic enough to appear on a species combat profile. She could sweat. It was such a simple thing, such a small, wet, unglamorous thing. But as the temperature climbed past 55 degrees, and species after species began to slow down, overheat, and seek shelter, Maya Chen kept walking. Her body was doing what human bodies had been doing for 2 million years on the African plains of Earth. It was dumping heat through her skin, cooling her blood, keeping her core temperature stable while the world around her tried to cook her alive. She was not comfortable. She was hot and tired, and her feet hurt, and the sulfur stung her eyes. But she was functional. She was moving. She was patient. During the first afternoon, she stopped beside a gas vent and studied it. The vents erupted in patterns, she noticed. There was a rhythm, roughly every 4 minutes, and between eruptions, the air near the vent was actually cleaner than the surrounding atmosphere, because the pressure differential pulled in fresher air from higher up. She timed the cycles, then moved through the vent fields during the safe windows. She tore a strip from her undershirt and found a deposit of itite rock nearby, a chalky mineral that crumbled easily. She ground it into powder, packed it into the cloth, and tied it around her nose and mouth. A crude filter, nothing more. But it kept the worst of the sulfur out of her lungs, and that was enough. By nightfall on day 1, she had covered 30 kilometers. Not the fastest, not the most impressive, but she had not stopped, and she had not slowed down. On day 2, the silicate storm hit. It came roaring across the flats like a living thing, a wall of superheated glass particles, driven by winds that screamed between the rock formations. Most cadets had been warned about these storms in their briefings. The standard response was to find shelter, hunker down, and wait it out. A Gorvathi could crouch behind a rock and let the silicate wash over their armored hide. A Chelzik could dig into the ground with their powerful forelimbs. The storm would pass. Maya could not do either of these things. Her skin would be shredded by the glass particles in minutes. So she did something else. She had been tracking the wind patterns since she landed, and she had noticed that the gas vent columns disrupted the airflow in predictable ways. She found a cluster of 3 large vents that formed a natural windbreak, timed her approach between eruptions, and pressed herself into the sheltered pocket between them. The storm raged around her, but the turbulence from the vents broke up the worst of the particle flow. She sat there for 4 hours, breathing through her makeshift filter, and waited. When the storm passed, she got up and kept walking. She found Tor on the afternoon of day 2. The Gorvathi was lying on his side behind a ridge of volcanic rock. His massive chest was heaving, his mouth was open, and his eyes were glazed. He had charged too hard for too long, and his body, built for short bursts of incredible power on a cold, heavy-gravity world, had finally run out of fuel in this oven. His thick hide, which was excellent at keeping heat in on his frozen homeworld, was now trapping it inside him. He was cooking from within. Maya knelt beside him. He was 3 times her size and probably 10 times her weight. His eyes rolled toward her, barely focusing. "Beacon," he croaked. "Press my beacon." She did not press his beacon. Instead, she looked around, studied the terrain, and found what she needed. Behind the ridge, the rock formation created a shadow zone, where a gas vent on the other side pushed cooler subsurface air through a crack. It was not cold, but it was 15 degrees cooler than the surrounding air, and that was enough. She could not carry him, she could not even roll him, but she could talk. "Tor," she said, "I need you to crawl 3 meters to your left. Just 3 meters. Can you do that?" He stared at her. The small, soft, breakable human, who was supposed to wash out on day 1, was kneeling beside him, not even breathing hard, asking him to crawl. He crawled. She guided him into the cool zone, propped his head up so the cooler air flowed across his face, and then pulled off her boots. She had been collecting condensation in them overnight, a trick she had learned years ago in the deserts back on Earth. There was not much water, maybe a few mouthfuls, warm and tasting like feet. She poured it over his head and into his mouth. "Rest," she said. "The temperature will drop in about 4 hours when the gas giant eclipses the sun. You will be able to move again then." She left him there and kept walking. Maya reached the extraction beacon 7 hours before the next cadet. She found a flat rock near the beacon, sat down and opened her lunchbox. Inside, wrapped in foil she had shaped before the trial, were 2 rice balls. They were slightly crushed and very warm, but they were food, and she ate them slowly, one small bite at a time, savoring each one. She was sitting there, eating her lunch in the middle of a volcanic hellscape, when Senior Instructor Vretkin arrived with the monitoring team in a transport shuttle. The instructor stepped out, looked at the human sitting on a rock with her lunchbox, and stopped walking. Maya looked up. "Would you like some?" she asked. Vretkin did not answer. She turned to her datapad and pulled up the biometric data that the Academy's monitoring systems had been recording from every cadet's implanted tracker throughout the trial. She read Maya's data 3 times. The human's cortisol levels, the stress hormones, had been elevated from the first hour. Her pain markers were high. Her fatigue indicators were deep in the red by the end of day 1. Every biological signal in her body had been screaming at her to stop, to rest, to give up, to press the beacon and make it all end. And she had just kept walking, eating her rice balls, making charcoal filters, saving Gorvathi 3 times her size. Vretkin closed the datapad. She opened Maya's personnel file and added a single note at the bottom, flagged for the attention of every instructor at the Academy. It read, "Monitors pain, does not obey it." She looked at the human one more time. Maya was finishing her second rice ball, brushing the crumbs off her lap with small, careful hands. Vretkin turned and walked back to the shuttle without a word. "Ha!" The instructor claimed humans can't survive Deathworld training. She just savored her lunch. Ha! Part 3. 6 weeks into the training cycle, 26 cadets remained out of the original 42. The ones who were left had earned their place through broken bones, burned skin, torn muscles, and sheer stubborn refusal to quit. They were harder now, quieter. They moved through the academy compound with the careful, efficient movements of beings who had learned what it cost to waste energy. Maya Chen was still there. This fact bothered Senior Instructor Vrethkon more than she would ever admit out loud. The human had not topped a single individual exercise. She was not the fastest. That was Six, who could cross 100 meters of rough terrain in the time it took most cadets to blink. She was not the strongest. That was Tor, who had recovered from his collapse in the Ashland Flats and had since ripped a bolted door off its frame during a breach exercise with his bare hands. She was not the toughest. A Chelzik named Dur had taken a venomous bite from a cave predator during a night exercise and had simply continued the mission with the toxins slowly working through his system, finishing the course before reporting to medical. But Maya was something that no species profile had a category for. She was consistently good at everything. Not brilliant, not record-breaking, but solidly in the top quarter across every single discipline. Combat, navigation, survival medicine, threat assessment, environmental adaptation, team coordination. No cadet in the history of the Academy had ever scored in the upper range in all categories at the same time. Most species were built for specialization. They were very good at one or two things and average or poor at everything else. Maya was good at all of it, and the instructors were beginning to talk about her in the hallways when they thought no one was listening. Vrethkon decided it was time to test something different. Phase 2 of the training cycle focused on team operations. The instructors divided the remaining cadets into fire teams of 4 and assigned each team a leader. The assignments were supposed to balance strength across the teams, mixing different species and skill sets to create effective units. Vrethkon did not do this for Maya's team. She assigned Maya as fire team leader and gave her 3 cadets that no other leader wanted. The first was Pel, a Pelori, an amphibian species with smooth blue-green skin, large wet eyes, and a nervous disposition that had nearly gotten him washed out twice already. The second was Ketch, a young Gorvathi runt, barely half the size of Tor, who had passed every physical test by the smallest possible margin, and froze under pressure. The third was Dur, the tough old Chelzik veteran, who was missing his left arm from a war that predated most of the cadets' births, and whose prosthetic replacement had been malfunctioning since week 3. It was, by any fair measure, the worst team in the cohort, and everyone knew it. The mission was the Meyerfall Depths, a flooded cave network beneath the Academy compound that stretched for kilometers underground. Bioluminescent predators lived in the dark water. Visibility was near zero in most sections. The caves shifted and groaned with geothermal pressure, and tunnels could flood or collapse without warning. Each team had to navigate to the deepest chamber, retrieve a signal beacon, and return to the surface within 30 hours. Other teams got favorable compositions. 6 led a team of 3 fast, experienced cadets. Tor's team was built around raw power. Maya got the scraps, and everyone in the cohort knew that Vrethkon had done it on purpose. They entered the caves at dawn. The first 6 hours went smoothly enough. Maya led from the middle of the formation, keeping Dur on point because his species had the best low-light vision, putting Ketch behind him for protection, and keeping Pel close to her at the rear. She moved slowly, checking the water depth with each step, listening to the sounds of the cave, reading the way the bioluminescent organisms in the water reacted to movement and temperature changes. Then the predator came. It rose out of the dark water without warning, a long, eel-like thing with a mouth full of translucent teeth and 4 grasping arms. It was fast, much faster than anything that lived in the dark had a right to be. And it lunged straight at Pell. Pell screamed. It was a high, wet, bubbling scream, and he stumbled backward, arms flailing, eyes wide with blind terror. The predator missed him by inches, splashing back into the water. But Pell was gone, mentally gone, curled against the cave wall with his hands over his head, making small whimpering sounds. Dur had his weapon up, scanning the water. Ketch was frozen in place, just standing there with his mouth open and his hands shaking. Maya moved to Pell. She did not shout at him. She did not grab him or shake him or tell him to get up and fight. She knelt beside him in the shallow water, put her hand on his shoulder, and spoke quietly. Pell, listen to my breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Match me. In, out, in, out. She breathed with him, slow, steady, calm. The predator circled somewhere in the dark water. Dur tracked it with his weapon. Maya kept breathing with Pell until the Pelori's gasping slowed, and his hands came down from his head, and his eyes focused on her face. Good, she said. You are fine. It missed. We are going to keep moving now. Stay behind me. She stood up, moved to Ketch, and put her hand on the young Gorvathi's arm. He flinched. Ketch, she said, I need you to walk. Just walk. Stay in formation. You do not need to fight anything right now. You just need to walk. Can you walk? He nodded jerkily and started moving. 8 hours later, Dur's prosthetic arm shorted out in the waist-deep water. The mechanical limb seized up, locking at the elbow, throwing off his balance, and making it impossible for him to aim his weapon properly. He swore in his native language and smashed the arm against the cave wall, which did not help. Maya pulled cord from her pack, fashioned a quick sling that held the frozen prosthetic against Dur's chest so it would not drag him off balance, and redistributed his equipment between herself and Ketch. Dur grunted, which was the closest a Chelzik came to saying thank you. They reached the deepest chamber at hour 22. They were not first. 2 teams had already retrieved their beacons and were heading back. But Maya's team retrieved theirs without a single emergency beacon activation, without a single injury, and without leaving anyone behind. They emerged from the caves at hour 29, wet and exhausted and blinking in the harsh volcanic light. 3rd place out of 6 teams. Vrethkan was waiting at the cave entrance. She looked at Maya's team, all 4 of them standing upright, all 4 of them present. She looked at her datapad, scrolled through the mission data, and said nothing. She turned and walked away. That night, Maya cooked. She had been planning this for weeks. Since the first week of training, she had been trading with the Academy's supply staff. Small trades, quiet ones. A favor here, a repair there. She had helped a Korath supply technician fix a broken heating unit in exchange for access to local herbs. She had traded her dessert rations for 6 weeks running to a Gorvathi kitchen worker in exchange for a small portable burner and a metal pot. And she had brought things from Earth in her lunchbox that nobody at the Academy understood. Small sealed containers of dried spices, salt, sugar, dried chilies, sesame seeds. She set up her burner in the common area of the barracks. She filled her pot with water and local starchy tubers she had identified as edible during a field exercise. She added dried mushrooms, ground spices, salt, and a generous amount of chili flakes. She cooked slowly, stirring, adjusting, tasting. The smell filled the barracks. It was not a smell that any of the alien cadets had encountered before. Most galactic species ate food raw or minimally prepared. Meat was meat. Plants were plants. You ate them for energy and moved on. The idea of combining ingredients, of adding substances that had no nutritional value purely because they changed the way food tasted, was not something that existed in most galactic cultures. Tor came first. He stood over her portable burner, his massive nose twitching. "What is that?" he asked. Food, Maya said. She held up a spoonful. Try it. He did. His eyes went wide. He took another spoonful, then another. 6 came next, drawn by the smell and by curiosity. She took a small taste, and then she went very still for a long time. Her mandibles clicked slowly. You do this to your fuel? She asked. We do, Maya said. We have been doing it for thousands of years. We call it cooking. But these additions, these powders, they have no caloric value. They provide no energy. Why do you add them? Maya smiled. Because they taste good. 6 stared at her. The concept seemed to require significant processing. More cadets came. Maya served them all, scooping the thick, spicy stew into whatever containers they had. A Felisari ate cautiously, then purred. A Pelori, Pel himself, took a bowl and ate it sitting beside Maya without saying a word. But he did not look afraid. Ketch ate 3 bowls and asked if there was more. They sat together in the barracks, 26 cadets from 18 species, eating a human woman's spicy stew in a volcanic cave, and something shifted. Something quiet and hard to name. They were not just cadets in the same program anymore. They were people who had shared a meal. In the doorway of the barracks, standing in the shadows where no one could see her, Vrethkan watched. She watched the humans serve food to beings that could crush her with one hand. She watched them sit together. She watched them eat. She did not enter. Later that night, alone in her quarters, Vrethkan opened an old file on her datapad. It was the Terran Union's original First Contact biological summary, the document that had been sent to every galactic government when humans first made contact. She had read it once, years ago, and dismissed most of it. She found the line she was looking for, buried in a section about human environmental adaptation. Humans do not merely survive hostile environments. Given sufficient time, they domesticate them. She read it again. She thought about a small woman sitting in a volcanic barracks, feeding an army with a metal pot and a handful of dried spices. She closed the file and stared at the wall for a very long time. The instructor claimed humans can't survive Deathworld training. She just savored her lunch. Part 4. 19 cadets stood on the parade ground. The volcanic wind whipped ash across their faces, and they did not blink. They were not the same beings who had arrived 10 weeks ago. They were leaner, harder, and quieter. They had been broken down and rebuilt by the worst that Korath 7 could throw at them. And they were still standing. Senior Instructor Vrethkan stood before them with her hands clasped behind her back. And for the first time since the training cycle began, she did not look at them with contempt. Phase 3, she said. The Crucible. Nobody moved, but the air changed. Every cadet in the formation knew what the Crucible was. It was the final elimination trial, the thing that separated graduates from everyone else. Older cadets spoke about it, the way soldiers spoke about real combat. Some of them did not speak about it at all. You will be transported to a quarantined island 200 kilometers east of this facility, Vrethkan continued. The island contains live fauna, real environmental hazards, and active toxin zones. Nothing on that island is simulated. Everything can kill you. Your mission is to cross the island in teams, locate and neutralize a hostile installation on the far shore, and extract within 48 hours. She paused to let that settle in. Cadets have died in the Crucible, she said. Not often, but it has happened. Your emergency beacons will function, and medical teams will be standing by. If you activate your beacon, you will be extracted, and you will not graduate. There is no shame in this. The Crucible exists to find the line between what you can survive and what will kill you. Your only job is to make sure you find that line before it finds you. She read out the team assignments. Maya listened with her usual calm, waiting for her name. Fire Team 7, Chen, Tor, 6. Maya blinked. She looked at Vrethkan, and for a brief moment, Something passed between them. The instructor held her gaze, expressionless. Then she moved on. The message was clear. Vrethkan had spent the entire training cycle testing Maya with disadvantages. Bad teams, bad conditions, bad odds. Now she was giving her the best possible team. Two of the most capable cadets in the cohort. Beings who were stronger and faster and more lethal than Maya in every measurable way. This was not a gift. This was a different kind of test. Vrethkan wanted to see what the human did when she could not hide behind the role of the underdog. The island was worse than the briefing suggested. The transport dropped them on a black sand beach at dawn, and within 30 minutes, the first acid rain cycle began. The rain fell in thin, hissing sheets that left burns on exposed skin, and ate through standard fabric in minutes. Tor's thick hide handled it well enough. 6 exoskeleton was naturally resistant to most corrosives. Maya pulled a treated rain cover from her pack, something she had waterproofed with local mineral wax during a field exercise 2 weeks earlier, and kept moving. The jungle beyond the beach was dense and hostile. The trees were not really trees. They were massive fungal structures, pale and fleshy, with root networks that shifted underfoot, and canopy layers that blocked out the sky entirely. Things moved in the darkness between the trunks. Big things, with too many legs and too many teeth. They worked as a unit. Tor took point, his massive body clearing a path through the undergrowth, his armor shrugging off the smaller predators that lunged from the shadows. 6 moved on the flanks, her speed and camouflage letting her scout ahead and behind simultaneously, her compound eyes catching movement that neither human nor Gorvathi eyes could detect. Maya moved in the center, navigating, reading the environment, making the calls. She was good at this. She noticed things, the way the fungal root network pulsed in certain areas, suggesting underground water or heat sources, the way certain predator species avoided particular zones, which meant something worse lived there. The way the magnetic anomalies that scrambled their navigation equipment followed patterns tied to the geothermal vents beneath the island. They moved fast. By nightfall, they had crossed 2/3 of the island and were ahead of every other team on the monitoring board. Tor was enjoying himself, grinning his broad Gorvathi grin whenever something tried to attack them, and he got to hit it. 6 was in her element, moving through the fungal jungle like a ghost with knives. On the morning of day 2, the jungle tried to kill them. It happened fast. They were moving through a dense fungal grove when the ground beneath 6 erupted in a cloud of pale spores. A fungal bloom, a sudden reproductive burst from the root network, triggered by the vibration of their footsteps. The spores filled the air in a thick, choking cloud, and 6 caught a face full of them before she could react. She went down immediately. Her body hit the ground hard, and she started convulsing. Her mandibles locked open, her limbs jerked in sharp, uncontrolled spasms, and a high keening sound came from somewhere deep in her thorax. The spores were a neurotoxin, and for Velinari biology, they were potentially lethal. Tor was at her side in an instant. He looked at Maya with wide eyes. "We need to press the beacon." Maya was already kneeling beside 6, checking her airway, watching the pattern of her convulsions. She was thinking fast, pulling together everything she had learned in 10 weeks of xenobiology courses, field exercises, and late nights reading species medical profiles on her datapad. "If we press the beacon, we are all out," Maya said. "All 3 of us. She doesn't graduate. If we do not press the beacon, she dies." "She is not going to die." Maya opened her lunchbox. Tor stared at her. "This is not the time for food, human." But Maya was not reaching for food. She was reaching for the small sealed containers that she kept in the bottom of the lunchbox, underneath the rice and the wrapped meals and the thermos. containers of earth spices and compounds that she had been carrying since day one. She pulled out a tiny glass vial filled with dark red oil, capsaicin extract, concentrated from the dried chilies she had been hoarding and trading for since her first week at the academy. Maya knew two things in that moment. First, she knew from her xenobiology studies that the fungal spores worked by binding to velinari neural receptors and shutting them down one by one. If the process completed, Zix's autonomous nervous system would stop, and her heart would follow. Second, she knew that capsaicin, the chemical that made earth chilies hot, triggered a massive violent purge response in velinari nervous systems. It was essentially a chemical reset button. It would flush the neural receptors clean, spores and all. It would also be the most painful thing Zix had ever experienced. "Hold her down," Maya said. He pressed his massive hands against Zix's shoulders, pinning her convulsing body to the ground. Maya opened the vial, tilted Zix's head back, and poured 3 drops of concentrated capsaicin extract directly onto the velinari's exposed mouth parts. The sound that came out of Zix was something that none of them had ever heard a velinari make. It was not a scream. It was beyond a scream. It was a sound of pure, overwhelming sensory overload, a shriek that echoed through the fungal grove and sent every predator within 100 meters running in the opposite direction. Zix's body arched. Her exoskeleton flushed from its normal dark iridescence to bright burning red. Her mandibles snapped open and shut with enough force to sever a limb. Tor held on, his muscles straining, his teeth clenched. And then it stopped. Zix went limp. Her breathing steadied. The convulsions ended. The spores, flushed from her neural receptors by the capsaicin purge, oozed from her spiracles in a thin, pale liquid. Her exoskeleton slowly faded back to its normal color. She opened her eyes. They focused on Maya's face, inches from her own. "What?" Zix whispered, her voice raw and shaking. "Did you just do to me?" "I saved your life with chili sauce," Maya said. "Can you stand?" Zix could stand, barely. They rigged a carry system between Tor and Maya, supporting the velinari between them, and they kept moving. The hostile installation was 6 kilometers ahead. They had 9 hours. They made it with 2 hours to spare. The installation was defended by automated systems and environmental traps. Maya planned the approach. Tor broke through the defenses. Zix, still shaking, still weak, provided targeting data from her superior eyes. They worked together, and they completed the mission. At the extraction point, medical teams rushed in to check Zix. Tor sat down heavily and let out a long breath that sounded like a small earthquake. Other teams were arriving, battered and bloodied. Maya sat on a rock at the edge of the extraction zone. She opened her lunchbox one last time. Inside, in a sealed container she had prepared before the trial began, was a small portion of spiced lentil stew. It was cold, but it was food, and she ate it slowly with a small metal spoon, one careful bite at a time. She savored every mouthful, while the chaos of extraction swirled around her. Zix, wrapped in a thermal blanket, with 2 medics scanning her vital signs, watched Maya eat. "Human?" she called out, her voice still rough. Maya looked over. "If you ever put that substance in my mouth again, I will kill you." "You are welcome." That night, in her private quarters, Vrethkan reviewed the crucible footage. She watched the moment the spores hit Zix. She watched Tor freeze, reaching for the beacon. And she watched Maya Chen open a lunchbox and pull out a bottle of chili extract. She paused the footage on Maya's face at the exact moment the human made the decision. She studied it. The expression was complex. There was fear there, real fear. There was uncertainty. But underneath both of those things, holding them up like a foundation holds up a building, there was something else. A steady, quiet determination. A refusal to accept the situation as it was. A human looking at a problem that should have been impossible, and deciding, calmly, to solve it anyway. Vrethkan opened a communication channel to the Academy Commandant. "Sir," she said, "I need to discuss the human." "Which aspect?" Vrethkan looked at the frozen image of Maya Chen's face on her screen. "All of them." Now, the instructor claimed humans can't survive Deathworld training. She just savored her lunch. Part 5. The graduation amphitheater had been carved into the rim of Korath VII's great caldera 300 years ago by the first commandant of the academy. It was open to the sky, a vast semicircle of black volcanic stone rising in tiered rows above a central stage. Behind the stage, the caldera dropped away into a glowing pit of molten rock that cast everything in a warm orange light. It was a place designed to remind everyone present that the universe was violent and beautiful and did not care about any of them, and that the beings who stood on that stage had earned the right to stand there anyway. 17 cadets remained. Out of 42 who had started, less than half had survived the full training cycle. Some had washed out in the early trials. Some had broken during Phase 2. 3 had activated their beacons during the Crucible. 1 had been medically retired after an encounter with a predator that had taken most of his left leg. They were all alive, which was better than some years, but they carried their losses with them. The empty spaces in their formation were visible, and nobody pretended otherwise. The amphitheater was full. Instructors, support staff, representatives from the Galactic Council, military attachés from a dozen species governments, and a small delegation from the Terran Union who had traveled a very long way to be present. They sat in the upper tiers, watching the 17 cadets standing in a single line on the stage below. The Academy Commandant presided. He was Dralvani, like Vrethkan, but older and larger. His scales faded to a pale gray gold that spoke of centuries of service. He spoke the traditional words about duty and survival and the weight of the title they were about to receive. His voice was deep and formal, and exactly right for the occasion. Then he stepped aside, and Senior Instructor Vrethkan took his place. This was tradition. The Senior Instructor called each graduate forward, one by one, and delivered a single assessment, one sentence. It would be recorded in the graduate's permanent file, repeated at every posting and promotion board for the rest of their career. In some cases, it became more famous than the graduate themselves. Vrethkan had been delivering these assessments for 300 years, and she had never wasted a word. She began. A Chelzik named Dur was called first. He walked forward on his 4 legs, his prosthetic arm freshly repaired and gleaming. Vrethkan looked at him and said, "Enduring." Dur dipped his head and stepped aside. A Felisari was next, then a Pelori, then 2 more Chelzik. One by one, they crossed the stage, received their word, and took their place among the graduates. Vrethkan's assessments were precise and fair. Relentless, watchful, fearless. Each one landed like a stone dropped into still water. Pel, the nervous Pelori amphibian who had screamed in the caves and frozen under pressure and nearly washed out 3 times, walked forward on shaking legs. Vrethkan looked at him, and something almost soft crossed her ancient face. "Brave," she said. Pel's huge wet eyes filled with tears, and he could not speak. He stepped aside. Ketch, the Gorvathi runt, was next. He had grown during the cycle, not just physically, but in the way he carried himself. He still was not big by Gorvathi standards, but he walked forward without hesitation. Vrethkan studied him. "Surprising," she said. Ketch grinned, showing all of his teeth, and stepped aside. Tor crossed the stage like a small earthquake. He stood before Vrethkan, towering over her, which very few beings in the galaxy could do. She looked up at him. Unbreakable, she said. Tor swelled with pride, so visible that his armor plates shifted and clicked. He stepped aside, still grinning. 6 was called. The Velinari moved with liquid grace, her iridescent exoskeleton catching the caldera light in shifting patterns of blue and green. She stopped before Vrethkon and stood perfectly still, her compound eyes reflecting the instructor's face 100 times over. Vrethkon held her gaze. Peerless, she said. 6 dipped her head in a slow, precise bow of respect and took her place. 16 cadets had been called. 16 assessments had been delivered. One name remained. Cadet Sergeant Maya Chen. The amphitheater went quiet in a way that it had not been quiet for any of the others. It was not just silence. Every being in the tiered rows leaned forward slightly, and every eye, compound or otherwise, turned to the small figure at the end of the line. Maya walked forward. She was, by every physical measure, the least impressive being on that stage. She was shorter than every other graduate. She was lighter. She had no armor, no claws, no venom, no camouflage, no regeneration. She was soft tissue wrapped around a calcium skeleton, exactly as Vrethkon had described her on the first day. She was wearing the same training uniform as everyone else, and it still did not fit properly. Under her left arm, she carried a battered metal lunchbox. She stopped in front of Vrethkon and looked up at her. The Dralvani instructor looked down at the human, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. The wind carried ash across the stage. Then Vrethkon did something she had never done before. In 300 years of graduation ceremonies, the senior instructor had always delivered her assessments from the instructor's platform, a raised section of stone that placed her physically above the graduates. It was tradition. It was hierarchy. It was the way things were done. Vrethkon stepped down from the platform. She descended the 3 stone steps to the main stage level and walked forward until she stood directly in front of Maya Chen. Not above her, beside her. The difference in height was still enormous, but the meaning of the gesture was clear to everyone in the amphitheater, and a low murmur ran through the crowd. Vrethkon spoke, and her voice carried to every corner of the carved stone. I told this cohort, on their first day, that survival is not learned, that it is inherited, that it is written in your biology, in your claws and your armor and your venom, and that no amount of will can replace what nature did not provide. She paused. The amphitheater was so quiet that the distant rumble of the caldera sounded like breathing. I was wrong. The murmur became a wave. Vrethkon waited for it to pass, then continued. This human taught me that survival is chosen. Every single moment, with every single breath, despite every reason to stop. Her body told her to quit on the first day and every day after that, and she did not listen. She does not have armor, so she made armor. She does not have claws, so she used her mind. She does not have venom, so she carried chili sauce in a lunchbox and used it to save a life. A sound came from 6's position in the graduate line. It might have been a laugh. It might have been something else. She is the most dangerous thing I have ever trained, Vrethkon said. Not because of what she can endure. She can endure a great deal, more than her biology says she should, but that alone would only make her tough. She is dangerous because of what she makes others endure alongside her. She does not drag them. She does not force them. She feeds them, and she teaches them, and she walks beside them, and somehow they find that they can keep going when they had every reason to stop. Vrethkon looked out at the amphitheater, at the hundreds of faces watching. Humanity is not a soft species, she said. They are a patient one. And patience is the predator that no prey ever sees coming. The amphitheater erupted. Tor roared. It was a full HFY War roar, the kind that shook the stone beneath their feet and sent small rocks tumbling down the caldera rim. 6 clicked her mandibles in a rapid, complex pattern that was the Velinari equivalent of a standing ovation. Pell was crying again, openly and without shame. The Terran Union delegation was on their feet. Even the ancient commandant was nodding slowly, his pale gold eyes bright. Maya stood in the middle of it all. She did not cry. She did not roar. She smiled, small and warm and real, and she looked up at Vrethkon with an expression that held gratitude and respect, and something that might have been friendship, or at least the beginning of it. Then she opened her lunchbox. She reached inside and pulled out a small wrapped package. She had made it that morning, before dawn, in the barracks kitchen, using the last of her carefully hoarded ingredients. She unwrapped it and held it up to Vrethkon. It was mango sticky rice, sweet, golden, fragrant, wrapped in a clean cloth, and still slightly warm. "Thank you," Maya said, "for not going easy on me." Vrethkon looked at the offered food. 300 years of tradition said that an instructor did not accept gifts from graduates. 300 years of tradition said that the senior instructor maintained distance and authority, and never showed anything that could be mistaken for softness. Vrethkon took the sticky rice. She put it in her mouth, chewed slowly, and swallowed. Her expression did not change. Her gold eyes did not waver. But just once, just barely, so slightly that only Maya could see it, she nodded. It was enough. The ceremony ended. The graduates dispersed to their families and delegations and futures. The amphitheater emptied slowly, voices fading, footsteps receding. The caldera glowed on, indifferent and eternal. 3 months later, on the same parade ground where Maya Chen had first been told she would not last 6 days, a new cohort assembled. 40 fresh cadets from 20 species, nervous and proud and utterly unprepared for what was coming. Among them, standing near the back of the formation, was a young human woman. She was 22, with red hair and freckles, and wide eyes that were trying very hard to look brave. Senior Instructor Vrethkon walked out to meet them. She delivered her opening address, the same speech she had given for centuries. Survival is inherited. Most of you will fail. The universe does not care about your feelings. She walked the line, inspecting each cadet, and she reached the young human. She stopped. The human swallowed hard. Vrethkon looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, in that same rock-slide voice, loud enough for the entire cohort to hear, "Do not underestimate the small ones. One of them taught me to eat my words." She paused, along with something called sticky rice. She moved on. The young human blinked, confused, and looked around for an explanation. Nobody had one. But in the back of the amphitheater, leaning against a stone pillar with her arms crossed, and her battered metal lunchbox sitting at her feet, newly certified Deathworld specialist Maya Chen watched the new cohort and grinned. She had packed enough food for 2.